I would say
Mhm.
I would say they are, you know, there are problems inside the United States, of course. So,
Mhm.
yeah, but it's another discussion.
Okay, okay. So, let's go ahead and get this started. I wrote in the email. I was hoping this would be like our final interview. I don't know if this is going to be our final one. I had a list of questions. I
Sure.
might
Well,
have,
sometimes the other ideas come about. We can just keep talking. It's a pleasure for
yeah,
me. So don't
yeah,
worry about any particular point where it needs to wrap up.
yeah. And the fact is, these videos are going to be on the internet forever. So, over the
Yeah.
years, people can watch them. And also, I was going to say, like, if someone were to watch my look at the videos on my channel, they notice that I just have interviews with you. But of course, who else would I interview? I don't know who else I would. I mean, you know,
Well, in a particular area of Christian scholarship, it simply is the case that I wrote the book. If that, if the analysis in Caesar's Messiah is coherent, then there
hmm
really isn't any other Christian scholarship that's meaningful. This is one of the problems
yeah,
with my work is that it's bombastic. The other New Testament scholars are, they are trying to make a living. They have a
hmm
PhD thesis they need to defend, and then along comes Caesar's Messiah, and it looks their work. If my work is correct, it negates their work just utterly, and so I don't blame them for doing whatever they can to resist it because I mean they have their self interest. On the other hand, it's I mean people who've read Caesar's Messiah are often perplexed why New Testament scholarship doesn't move more completely in at least presenting my work because it's so I mean it's founded in with a different quality of evidence than other I would say kind of Jesus theories in that it just uses existing texts and it doesn't need to conjecture anything like Q or uh, some kind of pre Christian community, or just those conjectures are required because New Testament scholarship really hasn't gotten to a firm place yet. So,
yeah, yeah.
nor will it
Okay.
ever. So,
So I just want to start with a short question here
sure.
because I've had many comments on my channel regarding this. So, what are your thoughts on the Arius Piso theory? Have you come across any evidence in your research that Piso was the main composer of the New Testament?
Yeah, I knew or actually had communication with phone calls with Abelard Rushlin. He that's not his real name. He's a Jewish guy. He's passed away. This was like 15 years ago. He and I were, talking on the phone. And I I had looked through his work, his pamphlet, and the number system, and it seemed incomprehensible to me, and I couldn't understand his methodology, how he would get to his conclusions. But the conclusions seemed pretty good. He
Mhm.
seemed to actually understand a lot about the origin of the Gospels and also how later authors sort of picked up on the Flavian typology and their sense of humor. But I know that he didn't get there from his numerical, methodology. This to me was just clearly crackpot. And I asked him if he had a rabbinical background, his family in Britain, and he said he did. And
Mhm.
I said, "Oh, that makes sense to me." So what happened with him was, as I see it, he was given the traditions basically that were in play in the creation of the Shakespearean literature. So he had some of the conclusions of this analysis presented to him, but he didn't know how they got there. Somehow he had one half of it without, the other, and so he sort of invented this numerologic process to come to the conclusions that he had been presented. I know this is sort of complicated, but this is what the only way I can make any sense out of what he did,
Mhm.
is that he was given the conclusions by the traditions in a British rabbinical family that had been given them by the group that produced the Shakespearean literature,
Mhm.
generations ago. But they didn't actually pass along the methodology of the Flavian typology. So he didn't
Mhm.
have that, but he had the conclusions, and so he came up with a rationale to justify the conclusions that he had. Um, I asked him about it, and I said, "This is how you did it, in my opinion," and he didn't really respond very vigorously. I think I had hit the nail on the head with that. Um, so that's Piso. I mean, then from in that work in Ebler's work, he focuses on the Piso family, and I would say this is at the Pisos as the authors. And I would say this is sort of like, claiming that, I mean, Homer didn't write, the Odyssey. It was someone who looked like him with the same name,
Mhm.
if you see my point.
Yeah.
They don't really know who's who. And, the Romans had so many names for one another. And
Mhm.
um, the genealogies were not really recorded very precisely. You see like a family of Caesars, the Julio Claudians or the Flavians, and you can kind of make sense out of the direct linkages, brother to brother, son, this, but outside of that, the Roman patrician families were very imprecise in recording any of their names and their families, and so that's why when you look at some of the Piso theories, they have these really complicated family structures,
Mhm.
which are generated just out of conjecture, and that's because there wasn't the kind of precise recording of members of families that we would have today, and so to try to get any coherency, you have to sort of fill in the gaps with conjecture. Um, so, I mean, I don't have any contradiction of these theories. I think, I mean, I would say that the numerologic process that Reuchlin presents is crackpot and is actually detrimental to my theory because since I come to some of the same conclusions, I basically am. Tarred with this brush of well, there's no methodology that comes to these conclusions. You're just fantasizing. You're just like Rushlow,
Mhm.
but actually it's just the opposite. I mean, the Caesar's Messiah theory is the most I mean, uh, kind of presented uh, fact-based theory that one could ever have, in that it simply takes two different texts and lays them side by side and asks the reader to look at the sequence of each. And so it's an inaccurate criticism of Caesar's Messiah. And uh, I kind of asked Rushlin to give up his theory. I said, now that Caesar's Messiah out there, why don't you rewrite your pamphlet? And then I also asked him, because I'd done enough work into like the Shakespearean theory at this point to know where he was coming up with these ideas. And I said, why don't you talk about your family? Why don't you write about that, and where the ideas, how they actually how the understanding of the origin of Christianity it was passed along within your rabbinical family. It didn't produce anything. He never wrote anything like that, and he never publicly commented on our exchange. And in fact, I think he was almost a recluse at that point. He reached out to me. I forget how, but we ended up having. He had my phone number, and we had a number of phone conversations. And so anyway, that's like the Piso theory is. as it's related to Rushland's work, is very unfortunate in that it is founded on a fantasy, the numerologic, you know, concepts, which really don't link or produce any methodology by which you can come to the conclusions that Rushland did. Um, and but at the same time, other than it's the methodology to to that it presents to
Yeah.
come to the conclusions, I think the theory is fine. I don't have any contradiction of it. It's I it really, I think it really hurt my sort of ability to get an honest appraisal of the Caesar's Messiah theory, because um, Rushland had created this sort of widely held understanding in New Testament scholarship of
Mhm.
the theory coming from a crackpot. So, I don't really, have much to say about it. I think the pamphlet Rushland brought out speaks for itself. It doesn't really have any methodology that's meaningful.
Yeah. I always thought that even if, I mean, it's possible he was one of the writers, but obviously it was commissioned and managed by the Flavian emperors themselves. I mean, Titus and
Right. I mean,
Vespasian.
well,
That's the
who
point.
was Piso? I mean,
Yeah.
look into the Piso family, and it's, there's some detail, but
Hmm.
there's a lot of cognomens, and this is why there's a guy named who calls himself Roman Piso, and he writes a lot of stuff about the Piso family, and his methodology to identify the members and then to show which one wrote which part of the Gospels and things is really hilarious. It's actually as bad as Abelard Rushland's methodology to use the number series to come to these conclusions.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't support these theories. They have to just you know go on their own if they want
Yeah.
to get pay attention to them.
Yeah. Okay. So, anyway, thank you for answering that question. Again, I had many people asking about the Piso theory. So, thank you very much. I want to go on to another short question. And who do you believe is the man of lawlessness in Paul's second epistle to the Thessalonians? From the research
Yeah,
that I've done, it appears that the letter was written by a pro Titus faction in response to the elimination for Christians to follow the law under Emperor Domitian's leadership, which would place Domitian, Emperor Domitian himself, as the quote, man of lawlessness, end quote.
yeah, that is one of the possibilities. Well, first of all, I'm not sure that the man of lawlessness can be identified with complete, certainty. I think that the logic in the passage, in my opinion, requires sort of understanding the humor with which the Pauline literature and the letters were written with. And it has a kind of self denigrating kind of humor, which is to understand it, you have to think of the following facts: is that Domitian is responsible for the Pauline material and for Revelation. I mean, I show
Yeah.
that analysis in Shakespeare's Secret Messiah. And he sees himself basically as another iteration of Christ or of Jesus. Remember, these are just names. They don't act to the Flavian authors of the New Testament. They don't mean anything really. They're just names that you can apply to anyone who has the political power to be able to force people to worship him. And so, in that passage, in where the law of ban of lawlessness is mentioned, I think actually the person that is being identified is in fact Titus. Um, he is the sorry, I had to let my cat out.
Yeah.
Um, he is the law of the law of the man of lawlessness is Titus, and he's the one who creates the delusion. I mean, the critical passage statement in in it is the concept of the God has created a powerful delusion. Now, why would the author, say such a thing? God creating a delusion. I mean, this is head scratching if this is legitimate theology. But in terms of Flavian humor, it's, I think, self-evident. He's referring actually to the Gospels. That's the delusion, and the Gospels are basically being, in a way, transcended by the Pauline letters, which are ascribing a new Caesar as having the power of Jesus, power, this name, this title. So it is very hard to understand because you have to not only recognize the nature of the Gospels, but then recognize that Domitian was trying in a way, to transcend the character Jesus Christ in with his Pauline materials. So it makes it really complicated, and uh, and then which is even worse is I think that Trajan got involved with and with Timothy. So the Caesars fiddled with the Gospels. I think each of them who were involved with it were trying to create a way to attach on to the legacy that they were hoping that Christianity would eventually produce. But the legacy would be created by the revelation that the literature was false. We talked about this last time,
Yeah.
that it's just sort of horrifying to realize that the purpose of the Gospels is to delude. Remember this concept: God has created a powerful delusion,
Hmm.
and that the man of lawlessness is engaged with. So you have this powerful delusion, which eventually is done away with, and then you get to see everything. Well,
Hmm.
the delusion is the idea that the Gospels are a sincere religious literature. The dispelling of the delusion is the moment where, like, basically the analysis of Caesar's Messiah becomes understood. People realize they've been fooled, and then they are, in a moment where they have inside of them the legacy that the Caesars wanted them to have. That they see the genius of the people who produced Christianity and created the delusion is horrifying, but is also powerful, so that they have their immortality. You see, so um, this is the hardest thing, in my opinion, to understand about the kind of Roman origin of the Gospels and the typology, is that the people who are producing this are doing it simply for legacy. I mean, think how complicated the typology in the Gospels that I kind of get into in Caesar Messiah. It's very complicated literature, hard to produce,
Hmm.
and it's supposed to be hidden, but then eventually be revealed. And so it's very sophisticated literature. Why would they do it? They're strictly doing it for legacy. They are doing it because of their vanity. So this is the hard thing to understand, really, about the the New Testament, is that it is a vanity piece that is really a document of the imperial cult. The imperial cult, wherein the Caesars were worshipped as gods, human gods, had literature that was associated with it. Panegyrics. These are homages to the divine Caesars. Well, there was all kinds of, there's statues of the Caesar gods. There's the Arch of Titus, where they are actually, Titus and Vespasian are called gods: God the Father, the Son of God. And so, you know, this is where the New Testament comes from. It comes from that world, that thought world, where the Caesars are presenting themselves as God for political power. There was this rebellion in Judea, the this war was really fought over who would be the Son of Man, who would claim the title, you know. And the Caesars won, and then they produced the New Testament to try to, shape Judaism in a certain way that would, be able to fit into the Roman Empire
Yeah.
um, without rebellion. And of course, this failed, but that really wasn't the important part of it to them. The important part was the vanity. So when you come to, like two theologians, you're really looking at humor and vanity, because the Caesars, even though they were producing, all of this imperial cult statues and literature, they knew perfectly well it was all rubbish. You see, I mean,
Yeah.
they weren't insane to that extent. It was just a political, kind of technique, and what was real to them was legacy. They really wanted to be remembered, and they thought that was the important. That was really all that they could do at that point in time. I mean, they couldn't live forever. They
Yeah.
couldn't conquer any more of the world than they had, and so this was what was of interest to them, was immortal legacy, and this
Mhm.
is why they wrote the New Testament, and this is why the man of lawlessness is actually one of them. And this, of course, this is repeated in Revelation, where you have the pit and people coming out of the pit, and these horrible uh, individuals, and um, they are mocking themselves in a way. You see, they're actually anticipating how the population will view them later on, and this is just their sense of humor in
Okay.
regards to the whole
Okay.
thing.
So you mentioned Timothy and Trajan, so I want to go that route. Could you give us some more information regarding the first and second Timothy and their connection to Emperor Trajan? As I
Yeah,
understand it, I mean, I thought Timothy was originally created by Domitian to represent Domitian.
right. I know. Again, this is you're here. You're at the very deep end of typology, and the only reason that I would make the claim about Timothy is because I can understand Timon of Athens. And so there's this, I show in Shakespeare's Secret Messiah that there's a lot of the Shakespearean material that is obviously playing off of the Roman um, humor in the Gospels. Like, of course,
Mhm.
Titus Andronicus is the most obvious one.
Mhm.
Very straightforward, very easy to understand. If you read Caesar's Messiah and then you read Titus Andronicus, almost anyone can get it. I mean, it's just really not that complicated. The author of the Shakespearean material is trying to, make it's cryptic, but it's not very cryptic. You can see that, this is the Last Supper, that Titus Andronicus, and in the original version of the play, the character was named Titus Vespasian, for
Mm.
God's sake. So
Wow.
if you know, if you know the if you know what the how the Gospels were produced, the Shakespearean play is just trivial to understand.
Mhm.
Um, but when you get to more complicated Shakespearean plays, then they're out of the typology in the Gospels, and they're into other parts of the New Testament. And Timon of Athens is this exchange between Ape Mantis and Timon, and they have this kind of struggle about, you know philosophy, and
Mhm.
what it means to be good and things like this. Um, and this is actually, in my opinion, this is Trajan putting a perspective on Domitian. And what I think happens historically is that Domitian is basically seen as insane and is incapable of governance. And so when Trajan, you know, comes to power, they destroy a lot of Domitian's religious, iconographic material, right? It's kind of well known that they did this. Um, and I think that Trajan then kind of wanted to comment on Paul. And so he sets up Timothy, and it's just a way of uh, basically making a comment upon Domitian. However, I have never produced the analysis by which um, this connection is clarified, because for one thing, I've never finished the analysis. You're into very complicated and multi-book typology. It's really related to Pliny the Younger,
Mm.
who wrote material that is basically connected or commenting upon the struggle between the Flavians and Trajan's family, and he characterizes Domitian as an ape. Domitian is presented in that material as an ape,
Mm.
and it's just really asking too much of anyone listening to this to try to follow my reasoning, because you'd have to get all the way through Caesar's Messiah and Shakespeare's Secret Messiah to even begin to understand this stuff. All I want to say about it is that um, the Caesars fiddled with the Gospels, and Trajan was, wanting to show himself as reasonable and Domitian as crazy, but also he was, had certainly had his imperial cult, and this process goes on all the way into the fourth century, because
Really?
remember when Constantine um, created his mausoleum, and he actually designed it, he put himself in the center in this tomb, and then surrounded himself with the physical. This is his
Yeah.
attempt with the bodies of the 12 apostles.
Mhm.
So,
You just found
so
some
this
random bodies.
is a real thing. I mean, it's actually recorded that Eusebius writes about this, and the mausoleum exists. It's in Istanbul. You can go and see it. And so he was making a pretty clear point that he is the Jesus.
Mhm.
so the who the Jesus is really depending on who is the person in power,
Yeah.
and that individual will make will make clarifying, kind of physical manifestations of his role as the savior.
Mhm.
I mentioned this in Caesar Messiah, that the Caesars, they just see this divinity stuff as basically ridiculous, and for morons, at least in
Mhm.
the belief, and then these are just names, terms. The Jews have these terms like the Son of Man, and the Caesar is saying, well, why don't you just call me by this title? You see,
Mhm.
then everything is fine. Then all of your prophecies work, and I'm the Son of Man. You see,
Yeah.
so it's really just a semantical criticism of the of the Torah, indicating that, well, the prophecies could just as easily be relating to us, and we could be the Son of Man. And so then you don't need to rebel. Why rebel just because of a term that is given to some individual? The term can be given to anyone. So the Constantine is definitely stating that he's the Jesus, and I think Trajan with Timothy in a very complicated way, which I have written out my analysis, and I am not completely confident in it. And people wonder why I don't like will bring out all this other stuff I've been writing about. And Billy, it's
Mhm.
like with Shakespeare and the Gospels and the Pauline stuff, I have so much to defend in terms of
Yeah.
legitimate criticism and confusion, that to add on to it at this point in my life is really, I don't think it really has any value. I really think I should just, I mean, I've produced enough material for future scholars to chew upon,
Mhm.
and for me to defend. And
Yeah.
I don't mind having debates, but if you started to debate Timothy and Trajan, think about how difficult that debate would even, have to,
Yeah.
just to make it coherent. The interlocutor would have to know so much about my theories,
Yeah.
but it just is, it's hard to imagine that it would be coherent. I mean, really what it would end up being is I would just be name called as a victim of parallel mania,
Hmm.
and and the and the other side would just would ridicule. So it really isn't anything that would have much value for the public. And
Yeah.
I've always hoped that what will happen eventually is that academics who have more time and interest in all of this will actually finish the will finish like the complicated Shakespearean plays and the Pliny, the younger typology. There's a lot of material that has it that I kind of am able to decode, but haven't really focused on it. And I hope that future generations will take an interest in it.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you for that answer. Um, so let's move on to something. You sent me an email, a picture. So I want to talk about this. You had mentioned in our third interview that the Bassano family had members working inside the Vatican. So could you give us some more information about that and the Bassano family and what you gathered in general? And also, did the Bassanos actually plan to write plays all over Europe in various languages?
Well, these are good questions. The that I read somewhere, and I have many of these things in my mind, which unfortunately are not documented or well documented. I read that there were Bassanos that worked for the Vatican. I haven't been able to find the citation. I know you wanted to ask me, so I don't have it.
Mhm.
But my point, uh, the reason I mentioned the Bassanos in the Vatican, I think is illustrated, to use an expression, better by Jacopo Bassano's painting of the Last Supper, and I sent a link to it.
Yes.
And if you look at the painting, you'll see immediately the humor in the Gospels manifested, because there is a human kidney that is sitting on the table, and there is a piece of bread that has been shaped into a human face that one of the apostles is pointing directly at.
Mhm.
So whoever, I mean, Jacopo Bassano is aware of the cannibal humor regarding the Last Supper. I mean, this is, I think, if you look how clearly the piece of bread has been shaped into a human face, there's no really disputing this, and it's the only. I mean, the explanation, of course, is just that the painter is aware of the Flavian typology. So the painting is from like 1542. It was before Emilia Bassano was born. So this would be, the example of the Bassanos having, an understanding of the Flavian typology that they kept secret, right? Kept to themselves, probably for a number of reasons, but that they shared because obviously Amelia Bassano then was aware of the same thing that Jacopo Bassano was, and her cannibalism cryptic humor is exactly like what is being represented there in Jacopo Bassano's painting. And then in terms of the Bassano family producing literature, well, I'm not sure if the family per se, but certainly there was a class of Jewish intellectuals that shared this understanding. I mean, the Bassanos weren't the only one. Um, I mean, Don Quixote, Cervantes' work is actually, relating to the Flavian typology,
Really?
and there are many books that in our literature that are in fact show awareness of the Flavian typology in like the modern era. I mean, as an example, the what is it? The Big Lebowski is a representation of the Flavian
Really?
typology. Yeah, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. When he says that they're mocking the kind of the environment. They would mock the environment of whichever location, in this case, Los Angeles. And at the time they were, I guess doing their research, there was this bumper sticker called Jesus Lives.
Mhm.
It was, everywhere for a while in
Yeah.
Los Angeles. And so this is why the dude abides. It's their little, but they actually have Lebowski is in a Freemason temple with checkerboard squares, and he's you know dancing to kind of this Freemason tune,
Mhm.
and of course the identity, um, the switching of identities is which is the Great Lebowski. This is relating to the kind of shell game that the Flavians played with who's the real Jesus, and then of course they have the Trinity represented at least twice, once by Germans, and then by the three people who are Lebowski and his two cohorts. I mean, I saw the movie once and just
Uh-huh.
I could understand it fairly straightforward. There's a lot of this, the Coen brothers are just one example of um, there's an awareness of the kind of the humor in the New Testament that Jewish intellectuals have, and
Mhm.
they keep to themselves.
Mhm.
They don't. There's a lot of reasons why it's better for them to not reveal it. It's in their interest to keep the religion going. For one thing, because they have so much control over it now with
Mhm.
Christian Zionism,
Yeah.
being such a powerful force, so that they don't really have a particular reason to make people aware of it. And so you can, there's just, as I said, there's just a lot of awareness of this, which is unfortunately they choose not to bring it out. When I brought when Caesar's Messiah first came out, um, yeah, I won't mention his name, but just someone who couldn't be more famous, in terms of show business, approached me about making a movie about it, and
Mhm.
it didn't occur. But I could tell in the kind of process that the individual was well aware of the kind of Flavian
Yeah.
typology. I didn't need to
Uh-huh.
and so what's happened. I mean, if you read the analysis I did called "The Freemason and the Rye," it's online.
Mhm.
You don't need to pay money for it. And I show that J.D. Salinger, with his book, is both sort of cryptically referencing Freemasonry and its initiation process, but he also shows awareness of the Flavian typology.
Mhm.
So a lot of people know about it, and they use it for, I mean, different purposes. It's really sort of, in a way, it's the same situation that existed in the feudal system. I mean, think about Christianity as being the premier mind control device of the feudal system, which is a slave system, which is, there's the patrician class, which created the literature and promotes the religion. And then there is the slave, right? I mean, all of Europe was enslaved with this system.
Yeah.
And Christianity was a mind control device. Well, over time, other groups basically superseded the Roman patrician class, but they certainly didn't want to get rid of Christianity because it was a way that they could create their own slave system.
Mhm.
So it was it's not of course the only way, but it was just they saw it as useful, and they certainly didn't see kind of the social upheaval and skepticism that would be engendered by bringing out the truth about the origin of the religion. And this is the fact about our world, is that we believe the historical narratives, right? We believe them,
Exactly. Mhm.
and it creates our mind and our kind of the Overton window, And so you've got, you have Jesus, the Shakespeare, the Holocaust, 911. I mean, they're always giving you a narrative, and the individuals have very limited ability to criticize it, right? I mean, I mean, until the internet, it just everything was believed that we were told.
Hmm.
It was only with the internet that they started having the capacity for individuals to be able to do research.
Yes.
Uh, and this is what led to all of the skepticism concerning 911, which if you look at it from a certain perspective is completely ludicrous, the narrative that was given us, but everyone believed it,
Hmm.
you know, when it was told. So this is the trick of the oligarch, is that they know they can control us through the presentation of histories, false histories that basically, shape our personalities in certain ways so that we are obedient. And there it is. After Caesar's Messiah and then Shakespeare's Secret Messiah, I just stopped believing in everything. I mean, I didn't have, I just couldn't, whatever was presented as some powerful historical structure, particularly things that affect, our day-to-day existence. I really became skeptical of these things. And I started to do research into all of them and
Hmm.
found, well, it looks like we are still in the feudal system. It's just there's more narratives now than just the Jesus one.
So I want to ask, are the Basanos still around? I mean, have members of the Basano
Yeah.
family tried
Oh yeah.
contacting you?
No, no, they never have. Nope, never have. But they're still around, and in fact, there's kind of a very well-known Bassano musician, composer, conductor of orchestras, and he's a direct relative of Emilio Bassano, and
Really?
he's very dark-skinned,
Really?
which is fascinating because
Mhm.
Amelia was always talking about her, the dark lady. My breasts are
Yeah.
done. Her skin color was a real issue to her in her life, and it's interesting to see a legitimate descendant of hers,
Mhm.
and you can kind of imagine what she was experiencing when she was in a world where paleness was considered beautiful. So
Mhm. Wow. Very, very interesting. So, I just want to jump again. We talked about New Testament scholarship. I just want to add, I know I've asked this in all my interviews. This is going to be my last question talking about New Testament scholarship. But will New
no,
Testament scholarship, here we go, the big one.
yeah.
Will New Testament scholarship ever really get it, or will it be lost forever? Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future of New Testament scholarship?
um, well, for the short term, I'm pessimistic because they have enough. There is a confluence of the need of existing New Testament scholars to protect their turf, and in many cases, this is financially required. They can't contradict their PhD thesis or the works that they have done, because that's how they make their living. That would be just the kind of secular New Testament scholars, and then of course the Christian New Testament scholars. It's a matter of faith, so
Mhm.
they're frozen in place,
Yeah.
and then that group, those two, um, like different kinds of New Testament scholars are basically supported by the political powers that use Christianity as part of the present feudal system that we live in.
Mm.
You see, so they do not want to have Christianity debunked at this point because it's important for the maintenance of the present feudal system. And so, in the short term, I think that those forces are dramatically stronger than anything that would come out of, like Caesar's Messiah, which, I mean, there's millions of people who have seen the movie and a couple 100,000 people have read the book. But when you weigh that against, you know, modern media,
Yeah.
it doesn't have it's
Yeah.
not going to be particularly powerful. So short term, no, the Christian scholarship will not change. It's held in place by a number of forces which are not going to dissipate. But in the long term, I think eventually um, Caesar's Messiah, an analysis like that, because you have to look at Caesar's Messiah as really just part of the process by which humanity will free itself from the influence of false narratives, and Christianity is just one of them. Right. So all of these things are being scrutinized. The political sort of method of controlling us through history um, is under attack, and I think that the human mind, being what it is, will ultimately free itself of and become skeptical about the narratives that are given to us. And once that's a widespread position, um, then Christian scholarship will have the transition that you're kind of wondering if will ever occur. It will occur following the transition to mass skepticism. And people will often say yes, but humans are weak, or we're controlled. We can't get like these are social critics who don't think things are changing fast enough. And I would just point out that I have never seen anyone, not a single person, who sort of came out of the darkness of the historical narratives that are you know held in place and promoted to maintain our present feudal system. I've never seen a single person who came to the point of skepticism who went back into the darkness. Every single time someone gets to the point of skepticism where they're criticizing the historical narratives, they never go back. I mean, it's like it's as though they are completely resistant. As I hate to use the expression because I'm not a big proponent of them, but they are vaccinated against
Yeah.
propaganda. You
Uh-huh.
see, that would be my long term position. Is that um, we're in sort of the second enlightenment. I mean, you had the first one, which was very useful and made big changes in our sort of understanding of ourselves.
Mhm.
But obviously, it didn't go far enough, and the second feudal system was able to be established. But we're in the process of another one, which is far more radical, far more powerful, and it isn't just a few hundred intellectuals exchanging books. It's everyone. I mean, think about your podcast. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just it's another way in which the new enlightenment can basically uh, free us from the second feudal system. So no, I'm very optimistic. As I said, I think the human mind is impossible to enslave if it has skepticism, as a as a basic premise, to look at the historical narratives.
So you believe that humanity as a whole is actually capable of grasping the truth about the origins of the Christian faith?
Yeah, I do. I think that, um, in fact, it's just a testament to the expertise of the people who created Christianity, who then used it for the first feudal system and are currently using it in our current version of the feudal system. How clever they are, because they have to overcome sort of the basic human propensity for reason. We need a couple things. We need, uh, just more. and more people who are moving into the light,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
To feel that they have a need to speak out. We need to have probably 10% of the population able to be in position you're in, where
Hmm.
they are clear-minded and also have that sense of righteousness that they need to express. You know,
Hmm.
they need to like communicate this as best they
Hmm.
can, and the
Yeah.
internet is, as long as it stands, we have the means to do it at this point. So that has to happen, and then of course, I mean, they're trying to set up in the new feudal system a kind of intellectual caste system where they are, you know, debilitating our intellect, our basic capacity for it. I mean, like here in California,
Hmm.
1 in 10 male children who's being born now has autism.
Really?
And yeah, 1 in 10. And so this is the epsilon and delta class that Huxley talked about in Brave New World
Hmm.
being created right in front of our eyes. So this is their goal, is to basically debase the intellect of humanity so that they would have no trouble with it. And so this is, one real troubling part of our present time, is that they're getting really good at this. If you look at autism, it's very interesting in that, I mean, I cannot heap sort of scorn upon the individual enough to really find words, but like Peter Hotez will talk about autism being a genetic disorder. Well, that's interesting, Peter, but it wasn't a genetic disorder in my generation.
Yeah.
we
Yeah,
we
exactly.
just have it. So I guess the genetics have somehow had a epiphany or something. I mean, you see, this is ludicrous. You can see that it's the toxicity. The toxicity is, deliberate. They want to debase our intellect. But even that is being exposed. More and more people are aware of it. I think that the vaccine mandates, with the COVID thing, was actually counterproductive. I think we're sort of at a diminishing returns situation where they can try stuff like the vaccine mandates, but this actually has diminishing returns. More people probably are now moved into the light than are, likely to stay in their house and wait for the vaccine to come.
Hmm.
It actually backfired. I think that there's a lot of things now, in my opinion, that are at diminishing returns. It's because there's too many people that are skeptical, and when they try to enforce greater degrees of mind control, actually produces just the opposite effect that they want. It'll produce more skepticism.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, no, I think a great struggle is occurring. Literally, the greatest struggle in humanity's history. Nothing compares to it. Uh, in that, you have the populace in kind of in a intellectual rebellion against the patrician class, against the oligarchs who control us with their histories and things. Um, and this is inevitable, that the once this begins, the process will eventually free mankind. So the oligarchs are completely aware of this and are trying to, I think, accelerate the debasement of our intellects. I think that, we should be very careful about what we put in our bodies. um, I
So
mean,
when you talk about oligarchs, are you talking about like these billionaires or high-powered
well,
politicians?
the controlling class is, it's a secret society.
Mhm.
I don't get invited to their parties. I mean, I can certainly see their activity, um, but in terms of identifying them, I mean, I wouldn't have a better, explanation of that than anyone else. I mean, certainly the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, these individuals. What I have said is, we can see, where the political power is in the world. I mean, you can see it in basically in at Bilderberg, or in these different points where they bring themselves together for their little secret discussions. What the public needs to do is to get DNA evidence on all of them. We need to know what is the genetic relationship between the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and the Bush families and the
Mhm.
Gettys, because I think what it will reveal is that there is family and ethnic connections, and so then we can identify the oligarchs,
Just like the
and
Flavians.
their plan will be exposed as well. So what I've said is that you can't go up to Baron Rothschild and ask for a blood sample, but there are people in the world who are related to him
Hmm.
that might be perfectly willing to give a DNA sample. Like, for example, like the Bush family or the
Hmm.
Rockefellers. Um, and so this is where I would start is just see if there are, cousins of the Rockefellers or of the Rothschilds or of the Bush. See if they'd be willing to give you a little, swab. Because remember, with
Yeah.
DNA, you don't need to like do blood. You just a
Yeah.
swab
Yeah.
and put it in a plastic thing, and then
Hmm.
start building a database. And it wouldn't be long before the entire oligarch family class, their caste,
Hmm.
would be identified. And then the question you ask, which is the most important question I think really in the world,
Hmm.
you could actually answer it.
Okay. Well, my last question. Actually, this is my first on the list, actually, but last question. Is Jesus a myth, or is he really just a literary device?
Yeah, well, I mean, uh, the I think that the question is semantical in many senses. I mean, uh, um, was the character that we see in the gospel a embellishment and a sort of transmogrification of some historical person? And if you read Josephus, you can see that there really was a Jewish kind of leader of an eminent family who was captured on the Mount of Olives, and then he was crucified and pruned, by Titus. So there was this Jewish individual who seemingly, if you look at the Josephus, gospel typology, was a real person.
Yeah.
And it's easy to imagine. I think his name would have been Eleazar, based on the coins and also the gospel use of the term Lazarus. I think this is actually who they're referring to. Is there are coins that have in the first century rebellion an individual called Lazarus the priest, and I think that would have been probably the basis, ultimately for the character of Jesus Christ in many ways. And that this was who
Yeah.
they were goofing off of with their literature. Um, but um, he is not a myth. A myth is, as I use the term, is something that develops organically. It's like you're not trying to fool people when you talk about Hercules. It's more there was someone who was a great warrior, and then this is embellished over time, and then the stories become codified, and the next thing you know, you've got Hercules as a literary character. That's a myth. In this instance, with Jesus, this is a deliberate insertion of a propaganda tool from the top going down. And it's kind of the opposite of a myth that bubbles up. This is Jesus is a propaganda device. He's a character who's created by the oligarchs of the time for the purpose of controlling, their populations. I mean, the idea, the political purpose of the Gospels, I suspect, was to read them in uh, by priests of the imperial cult, to people who were susceptible to the propaganda of the militaristic messianic movement.
Mhm.
I think Josephus talks about this, that they're worried that this messianic rebellion will spread throughout the empire. Jews are all over the place, and they don't want the Jews in Gaul to suddenly rebel. Um, and so they wanted to produce a literature that would basically just make it hard for the missionary activities to succeed.
Mhm.
And oddly enough, it completely failed. I mean, as a political device. I mean, say there. Imagine you're in the like the you know imperial court at Rome around
Yeah.
100. You just got the Gospels written, and you start to disseminate it there, and that the Jews are winding up for another rebellion because the Rome has spies everywhere, and so you get your literature out. You've got priests of the imperial cult are just told to read the story to Jews, and then in 114 you have the Kiddos Rebellion, and just even though it's been lost to history for some reason, not often mentioned, but if you just read the details of the Kiddos Rebellion, it was the worst bloodbath in the Roman Empire's history. I mean, the Jews rebelled. They had kind of a messianic leader, which is logical, and they genocided. I mean, they got control of Cyprus and they killed all 250,000 Gentiles. They literally just lined them up and
Wow.
killed every one of them. They depopulated uh, Cyrenia, which is modern day Libya, which had been the breadbasket of Rome. There's an actual letter they found of a Roman magistrate heading south down the Nile trying to get away from the Jews. In other words, they'd
Mhm.
completely destroyed the Roman military
Mhm.
power. And this led to this bloodbath with Trajan, and then that still wasn't enough. And then in 133, the Jews rebelled again. Right, you
Mhm.
had the Bar Kokhba rebellion, which is
Yeah.
another total empire-wide bloodbath. So the project as a political kind of Hail Mary failed, didn't work. They couldn't really stem the messianic fervor of the Jews, and the empire was descended into this costly chaos. But as an element of the imperial cult and of the vanity of the Caesar, it just worked like a charm.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because
Worked
then when
perfectly.
Constantine is a Flavian. I mean, there's
Flavius
another.
Constantine.
Yeah, Flavius Constantine, and he actually there's inscriptions in stone where he honors the family, his ancient family, and in fact he put his arch, the Arch of Constantine, is right next to the original first century Flavians' religious edifices like the Arch of Titus
Mhm.
and the Colosseum. So he put himself right there, saying, "Hey, I'm a Flavian too," um, and he then brought back the family cult. Well, he gave it the power of the Roman military. Basically, this is what happened. This is why
Mhm.
Christianity is even known today. It's even
Mhm.
something that's memorized. We're aware of it. Flavian gives it the military backing of Rome, and gets rid of the the imperial cult, because basically he's replacing the imperial cult with a Flavian cult that doesn't have any other gods being worshipped. You see,
Yeah.
even though it seems like it's monotheism,
Mhm.
kind of paganism is ending. Actually, what's happening is that Constantine is setting up just one individual who is going to be the receptacle of all of this glory,
Mhm.
and that's him, the Caesar.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's why his mausoleum is so critical for understanding, our history. Anyway, so this was the kind of the the backdrop of what happened with the Gospels, and why the future of Christianity is, I think, really very dubious. I don't
Yeah.
think it. I mean, it isn't going to go another 2,000 years. It's you know, um, I mean, who knows? It's what the revelation of Christianity is. It's simply an element of the revelation of the use of historical narratives for the purpose of social control. That's really what it is,
Mhm.
and that's why it's meeting so much resistance. It's because Christianity is very important for social control right now,
Mhm.
and so this is and Christianity isn't the only thing that is, that the population is basically quizzical about, right? I mean, you can see everything now is being questioned. It's
Mm.
all being questioned, and so it's just one part of it, but it's an important part. And if you see like, like Caesar's Messiah suddenly, being like discussed in the New York Times or something, you know that the entire kind of structure that the present feudal system is supported by is going to collapse very shortly.
Mm.
It really is. It doesn't have to be Christianity. There's a whole other. There's many narratives that are out there. I mean, I think the Holocaust can't stand a whole lot of scrutiny. I don't think 9/11 can stand a lot of scrutiny. I don't think World War II can stand a lot of scrutiny. Or, I mean, I think all of these narratives that we believe certain things, and this enables us to exist in our culture without rebellion. But the narratives that keep us in place are there for social control. And once one of them falls, Billy, I'm telling you, once one completely falls, I mean, if 9/11 falls, I think all the rest of them will fall too, because once the public gets in this momentum of skepticism, all of the historical narratives of the present feudal system will collapse.
Okay. Wow. That was a really good discussion. Really, really good discussion. We hold on, let me just stop this. Okay.